Be like Ibn Arabi. Don't be an asshole. Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy, The Meccan Revelations, Part 76, which explains the whole 76 ball thing that you might have seen if you're on YouTube. Anyway, so I'm trying something different today. I'm wearing headphones. Normally Editor Edward wears the headphones, but today I'm wearing the headphones. Because I am hearing the same music that you are hearing right now. In theory. I mean, so I can comment on it as we go. Okay, regardless, the beverage today is some rosemary tea in a First Gorka Rifles cup. And did I say that was the incense? That's the beverage. The incense is some Morning Star brand rose. Now, in order to make this work, sometimes I clear my throat, sometimes I burp, and I cut it out. You never get to learn about that, except for sometimes when I'm feeling silly and I replace the sound with like a chicken cluck. But today there's going to be no cuts, because I want to make sure that, like, this should be, like, in context to what you were hearing while I was doing it, right? Alright, anyway. Lighting the incense now. So also sometimes there's like dead air, sometimes there's like 20 seconds of... When we do that on the white pedal, I used to turn up the jar, which is what got me into all that trouble. And now I turn up the Tangerine Dream. Right, so what we do first on these is we read a poem from Hafiz. The Gift by Hafiz. And I think I'll use a little bit of sunlight today. The Hat Check Girl. Why are there so few in the court of a perfect saint? Because every time you are near him, you have to leave pieces of your ego with the hat check girl, who won't give them back. Ouch. Mwah. Thank you, Hafiz. That was lovely. And now, you might remember... Oh, can you see the back? You might remember last time we finally actually got past all the introduction, mostly. So today, presumably, we'll be starting to actually read Ibn Arabi for the first time in, like, months. The sources... See, normally I would cut out a throat-clearing session like that, but today I didn't. The Sources of the Law, Chapter 88. This chapter, the complete title of which is On Knowledge of the Secrets Pertaining to the Bases of Legal Prescriptions, is a methodical outline structured along the traditional framework for presenting usul al-fiqh. Its contents, however, are an early indication of the originality of Ibn Arabi's position. His concept of ijtihad, the effort of interpretation, end quote. Okay, what's next? We just finished a song. Oh, some drums. Cool. Wonder what it is. Bet it's in the description below. The second music track listed. Alright, sorry. Okay, let's try to avoid the singing. If there's too much singing, we'll just lower the volume a lot. Alright, anyway. His concept of ijtihad, quote, the effort of interpretation, end quote, the author will define elsewhere. But to which this is italics now, which in this context means it's Michel Chodkiewicz. So, because we're actually reading this stuff. But we got a page or two of Michel Chodkiewicz italics first. But like I said, we're most of the way. The author will define elsewhere, but to which references to ilm iaduni, the knowledge that Qadir receives directly from God himself. Okay, I guess if there's no words, human voices are okay in certain situations. Or to the light that guides the God-fearing man, refer. What? Okay. Can be seen from the chapter's earliest lines. Ibn Arabi is more explicit in another Futuhat passage. Quote, "We are not saying that ijtihad is what the men of exoteric sciences claim it is. For us, ijtihad is the effort that allows that inner disposition to be reached through which one becomes capable of receiving the particular inspiration that no prophet or messenger was able to receive during his time of prophecy. Since this revelation could not cast doubt over legal status firmly established by the messenger." End quotes. I'm going to turn on the light in here. I was caring more about aesthetic than I was about what the experience was going to be like actually reading it. Just give me a moment. To quote Sally from Third Rock from the Sun when she was in Austin Powers. Never mind. All right. Oh, the other thing is sometimes there's a long period of time that goes by where I'm trying to figure out where I was. And that happens. But anyway, we'll just try to keep our eyes on the page. In other words, or a finger where we left off, at the very least. In other words, in response to situations that do not appear to be expressly foreseen by the Quran or the Sunnah. I kind of dislike that when you search for the ancient Nordic goddess Sunna, the healing goddess who used to ride her chariot of fire across the southern part of the sky in the summertime and thaw everyone out. You end up with this Sunnah. They took over the word on Google. I hate it when that happens. Like if you try to search for Black Friday, meaning obviously Friday, October 13th, 1307, you get a bunch of shit about things that are on sale after Thanksgiving. I remember when they did that, and I was pissed off at the time when they first started using the phrase Black Friday to mean that. Just erasing history. Anyway, Quran or the Sunnah, as in Sunni, Sunnah, I think they're related, right? Divine grace can allow meanings, and when I say like horse shit and things that are just so stupid that in the editing process I'm like, oh, I can't allow people to know that I'm actually that dumb in the moment. Those are going to get left in too, because as I said, sounds a little like maybe this was the inspiration for the people who made the soundtrack to, or no, it's probably, never mind. I was thinking of the desert people in Zelda. Divine grace can allow meanings and applications to appear that theretofore were not perceived in the scriptures. This idea is not This idea is not unlike the concept of the decent people, the descent of the Quran upon the awliya. That's the saints, right? Quote, end quote. The saints through whom God's book remains a permanent reality for those he has chosen. They dipped a little bit into the whole chosen thing, didn't they? Where were we? For the jurist, this is not a question of innovating. Even if he is not among those whom God has thus favored with a specific inspiration, he should know that the only two, quote, active foundations, end quote, of the law are the Quran and the Sunnah, and that nothing is omitted from them. His efforts should aim at finding them within these two sources. Ibn Arabi returns to this fundamental point frequently, relying especially on verse 3 of Surah 5, and then in parentheses, quote, "Today I have perfected your religion for you," end quote. Oh, thank you. What follows from this divine declaration is that man should try to learn everything the law says. But what is really? Let me just read that again. What follows from this divine declaration is that man should try to learn everything the law says. Okay. But only what it says. What? But only what it says, since, quote, "that upon which the law is silent is left no more to chance than what it says. If each word of the Sharia means something, then the absence of a word also has meaning. And man, if he is not to transgress against the word of God, is not to fill God's silences for him." See, Lord Buddha, blessed be he, and Mohammed, blessed be he also, had different approaches to this situation. With Lord Buddha, he'd say, all right, keep it in your pants. And they'd be like, what if it's with an animal? He'd be like, keep it in your pants with an animal. They're like, what if it's a dead animal? And he's like, keep it in your pants with a dead animal. They're like, what if my wiener doesn't actually make physical contact with the inside of the severed head's mouth? And he's like, well, that's okay. Where Muhammad leaves it up to interpretation. He has silences. Buddha left nothing silent. No silences, no ambiguity. I'm just being silly. Cheers. Nearby? Is it? All right. Time to find where I was. Okay. The gaps in the law are part of its plenitude. The use of passive foundations, of derived sources, which consensus and reasoning by analogy are, what? Should lead neither to additions nor to deletions. Yeah, don't add anything to it, don't subtract anything to it. In fact, don't even read it. Just leave it in the shelf. It doesn't matter. These four usul are juxtaposed with the quaternary structure of the universal manifestation. The four divine names. People are perking up. Is one of them Agla? No. Keep working. You'll come. This is an Ibn Arabi theme par excellence. We see it in his writings on the science of letters. In the relationships he outlines between the three harakat, or short vowels, and the sukun, the stop sign in Arabic script. Is that like, the period or the full stop or something? Is there one? Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's a stop command. This guy. The stop command in the DNA alphabet. It's my alphabet, and I'm trying to remember. It was a long time ago. Actually, originally it was, 30 years ago. Anyway. Okay, the sukun stop in Arabic script on the one hand, and the higher degrees in the initiatic hierarchy on the other, and in his reflections on the symbolism of the Kaaba, the correlations thus established among cosmology, anthropology, law, and grammar may seem surprising. They are not the result of some rhetorical concern for artificial analogies. Quite the contrary. They are evidence of a cohesive doctrine whose justification can be seen in other sections of the present anthology. This guy right here. Much of the text translated here concerns the problem of the legitimacy of qiyas. It shows what makes Ibn Arabi look like the Mahab Zahiri and what separates the two. Who's the Mahab? Maybe they'll explain. Like Ibn Hazm, Ibn Arabi refuses to use qiyas, Q-I-Y-A with a hat S. The Arif Ba'Llah, the Gnostic, parentheses, in the etymological sense of the word, end parentheses. Thank you for clarifying that a book and a half in. Michel, what you mean by Gnostic, benefits from a special light that precludes his need to use this dangerous instrument. A second reason for his refusal will be addressed below, but in contrast to the Zahirites, he vigorously condemns anything done vigorously. Those who absolutely forbid. He vigorously condemns those who absolutely forbid its use. The Quran itself, after all, prescribed the use of reasoning, of which Qiyas... Let's see what the new song's going to be. Birds. Whatever that animal is in the classic, like, jungle sound effects, animal sound effects. Okay, alright. Got some twinkle fairy dust happening. We'll see where it goes. The Quran itself, after all, prescribed the use of reasoning, of which Qiyas is just a specific form. And this was in the most fundamental domain of all, beliefs. It was thus. Its use was thus, and all the more so. Perfectly licit. I guess that's the opposite of illicit. I'll have to meditate for a while to... Let's just put it up there. Licit. Not in matters of establishing metaphysical principles, but in establishing simple rules for practical application. See, we had to put a chicken cluck there because I couldn't just edit around it. Just muted it and... Thanks, chicken. After a short paragraph where, through the inspired nature of his writings, the Shaykh al-Akbar justifies the apparent lack of logic in their structure, in this case, the presence of a chapter on principles, usul, long after the chapters where he deals with their consequences, furu, the second U has a hat, and with no fear of the parallel he draws between their composition and that of the Quran, he methodically spells out a set of rules through which the contradictions among different legal pronouncements can be resolved. He then touches on the extensively argued touching on things that are extensive, as always. He then touches on the extensively argued question of abrogation, or nashk. Sounds nashki. Sorry. Doing away with a legal measure that had been initially formulated in the Quran or the Hadith, or replacing one measure with another, is neither the result of a whim on God's part, nor of an innovation in divine knowledge, parentheses which would be tantamount to what is implied by the Shiite idea of Bada, so strongly criticized by Sunni theologians. One of the points of contention. It's there in Filioque. No. End parentheses. It corresponds, rather, to the expiration of a possibility. In passing, we might note Ibn Arabi's insistence on the necessity of having words retain the meaning they had in the language of the Arabs. I don't know why I stopped dramatically before saying that. If the law is to, with a capital L, so you know they mean Sharia, if the law is to be interpreted correctly, it shows up quite characteristically in his exegetical, yes, what? Exegetical method. I think we went over that one before, where the most surprising of esoteric interpretations are consistently backed by painstaking analysis of the literalness of the text. This is also the position of the Zahirite authors, at least theoretically, but it did not help them develop a hermeneutics capable of discovering the spiritual meanings Ibn Arabi manages to tease out of the verses in the Quran. Teasing out from them. It's always reading regarding the use of ijma as a source for the law, end quote, which he considers to be consensus among the companions of the Prophet, rather than among the ulama of later generations, Ibn Arabi has a position that is similar in every respect to that of Ibn Hazm, whose position itself is in line with that of the founder of his school, in contrast to the mainstream doctrine where ijma is defined as, quote, the unanimous agreement of the community through the voice of its specialists at a given time. End quote. This position has the apparent effect of petrifying the laws, of depriving it of ways to respond to situations that were unknown to the first generation of Muslims. But it actually leads to restricting ijma's field of application, since agreement among the companions, with a capital C, was clearly not seen except on a quite limited number of subjects. This position, as we shall see, is perfectly in line with the one that Ibn Arabi personally applied to the use of the qiyas. Quote, I forbid myself to use qiyas, only because it leads to adding to the explicit prescriptions. End quote. Same reason I forbid myself from using. He wrote in, just tight rubber band. He wrote in a passage from this same chapter 88, the translation of which follows, for him, in the absence of a formal text or nas, or nas, I don't know, NASS, that determines a specific legal status, everything preserves its original status, which is its legality. The label forbidden, discouraged, obligatory, or recommended. I hate labels, don't you? Oh, that ultimately gets attached to the new song. I noticed. Did you notice? Let's see where it's going to go. That ultimately gets attached to something by... music is new to me, by the way. I just found a little hack where I happen to be logged into the Old Thursday Art Walk channel, and I think based on the songs I used to use, 20 years ago or whatever, in those videos, the algorithm was recommending all this really interesting music. So I was just like, hell yeah! And I just downloaded a bunch of it and edited it together, and it inspired me to record, so I could do this. And so I'm actually hearing these songs for the first time while you're hearing them for the first time. Isn't that kind of cool-ish? I mean, I heard a few seconds of each one and kind of skipped through to make sure there was no voices and stuff. Or tried to. I missed a little. Where were we? Yes, these labels that ultimately gets attached to something by the lawgiver is accidental in the philosophical sense of the term. Philosophically accidental, all right? Added to its essence, metaphysically based on the doctrine of Wahdat al-Wujud, this stance highlights the central axis of Ibn Arabi's spiritual teaching. Compassion for beings. Checkmate, atheists. No. Compassion for beings like that of the Prophet for his community, which in turn devolves from that of the Creator for his creation. This is not a case of laxism. Was that like being relaxed? Or, well, it's whatever appeared above my head. In another chapter in the Futuhat, although in this case he is implicitly addressing the murid, the individual who has chosen to fight for the greater holy war, with a capital G, capital H. All right, I'll stop talking about the capital letters. I'm freaking myself out. Ibn Arabi recommends keeping the most restrictive of the different legally admissible solutions for oneself, but, if asked about, reserving the least difficult solution for others. This same concern for not shrinking what God has expanded, like I said, tight rubber band. It's a solution for everything. Leads to setting strict limits on forays into interpretation. It should not aim at completing the law, in which nothing is missing by definition, since it was established by him whose knowledge encompasses all things, but only at seeking an answer, or at observing the absence of a response. Right, I looked away from the text for a second, and I shouldn't have done that. The absence of response, which is also a response, since it leads back to the principle of original licitness? Original licitness. Oh, is that related to original sin? If so, make that movie. In the Quran, why did I say that? Was a weird Freudian slip. In the Quran and the Hadith, nor should it apply to anything other than concrete cases that arise from time to time. Anyone who has paused collections of fatwa, like you do, and appraised the casuistic ingenuity they display in their attempts to resolve imaginary problems, will quickly understand the wisdom in this rule. This point of view, which has precedence in Islam, here Ibn Arabi is referring to Malik bi Anas, I'm going to pronounce it, although the companion Musruk bi al-Ajda might also be mentioned, he should not be considered solely as a condemnation of intellectual frivolity. In the Doctors of the Law, the Sufi is a child of the moment. Ibn al-Waqt. He does not need to anticipate the measures of divine wisdom, but rather to confront what is... That song should have started like 20 seconds later, because I'm about to end the Michel Chodkiewicz and finally start reading Ibn Arabi for the first time in months. And that would have been a really cool, like, dramatic musical shift. But, oh, what can you do? So to finish the Michel Chodkiewicz, he does not need to anticipate the measures of divine wisdom, but rather to conform to what divine wisdom requires at any particular moment. All right. So apparently this is an instrumental version of a song sung by the woman who was the inspiration for the bride in Kill Bill. And I think, if not this specific track, but other tracks that she sings were played in that movie or those movies, probably both. Anyway, just a little, the links are in the description, as I mentioned. Okay, you ready? This is Foundation of the Law and the Universal Fourfold Division. We're actually reading Ibn Arabi now. Are you ready? I'm certainly not. One sec. Okay. Foundation of the Law and the Universal Fourfold Division. Know that that's K-N-O-W. Know that there is unanimity regarding three entities upon which legal prescriptions are based: the book, the Sunnah Mutawatira, and consensus, ijma. The experts are not in complete agreement regarding reasoning by analogy, or qiyas. That's qiyas. So it's not like a little thing where they're selling T-Mobile in the mall. That's a kiosk. A kiosk is reasoning by analogy. Yeah, I think it's fun to reason by analogy, but I could see the benefit of abstaining from reasoning by analogy, at least for a period of time. If for no other reason than, like, shake up the champagne. That's a champagne bottle I'm shaking up. We'll do it this way. And then being very creative with a whole bunch of reasoning by analogy. Just, like, refuse to reason by analogy. Like when Crowley refused to say I until he started calling himself the Master Therion. You know, like, just, I'll have no ego until I have the biggest ego in the world, you know. Anyway, some claim that it constitutes proof, or dalil, and is one of the foundations for legal prescriptions, while others maintain, and this is my position, and remember, this is Ibn Arabi talking, that it should be avoided. What should be avoided? I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. You were paying attention. If you weren't paying attention, if you were distracted by the music like I was, just rewind it and see what he said right before that. God said, quote, "Fear God, and he will teach you." End quote. Quran 2, 282. But to be fair, there's things that are just as stupid in Proverbs, like. He also said, quote, if you fear God, he will give you discernment, end quote. People like to be like, wow, so people misinterpret the word. They translate it as the word fear. But the English word fear isn't what they meant. No, they meant like shock and awe and overwhelm. Which, yeah, okay. Like if you're like so in awe of the vastness of the divine that the music changes, then you're on the right track. That's what I'd say. So do that. When you hear me say fear God, just think of that when the music changed. No, if you want. I don't know. He might give you 2 measures of his mercy, that he might give you a little to help you walk and pardon you. End quote. Quran 57:28. Similarly, he said in regard to his servant Qadir, quote, we have given him a mercy coming from us, and we have given him knowledge from us, end quote. Quran 18:65. Who's we and us? Is that the Elohim, the plural God that shows up sometimes in the OT, Old Testament? This is how God transmits the knowledge he and in his mercy grants to his servant. Fearing God is work that is prescribed for us and whose status relates to one of the scriptural references, or all of them, regardless of how it is imposed upon us. Junaid said, quote, this knowledge of ours is related to the book and the sunnah, end quote. These are the 2 active foundations of the law, while ijma and qiyas were established only by the book and the sunnah, and are thus passive foundations. It is from these 4 things that the legal prescriptions whose performance leads to happiness came into being. The performance of things that leads to happiness coming into being is always... in the same fashion, everything in existence proceeds from 4 divine realities. These are life, knowledge, will, and power. Let's repeat them together. Life, knowledge, will, power. Let's make it culty. What are the 4 divine realities? And you reply, life, knowledge, will, power. Not willpower. Will and... Moreover, bodies also proceed from 4 realities. Heat, cold, dryness, and humidity. Are we getting alchemical here? Let's get alchemic. We're not going to cut to any music because we're listening to this lovely piano. Al-harara is heat. Al-baruda is cold. Dryness is al-yabusa. And humidity is al-ratuba. No singing. And beings that are engendered proceed from the 4 elements. Arkan, fire. Nar, air. Hawa, water, and Ma, earth. Turab, what? No. Okay, the 4 elements. The elements, Arkan is elements. Fire is Nar. Air is Hawa. Water is Ma. And earth is Turab. Finally, each human body is produced from 4 humors. Aklat, bile. Safra, black bile. Oh. Sauda, blood. Oh, yeah, no, okay. So the 4 humors. Humors are aklat, bile is safra, black bile is sauda, blood is dam, as in Adam, and phlegm is balgham. Heat and cold are active qualities, while humidity and dryness are passive qualities. So the dam is related to the word. The words Adam, as in the first man, and the word for blood in the Semitic languages, and the word for soil in the Semitic languages. So, if anybody says blood and soil, humans, planet Earth. Adam, sons of Adam, daughters of Eve, if you're into Narnia. And the soil is the whole Earth. That's what I'd say. Don't listen to any of those racist nonsense. Okay, reasoning by analogy. Al-Qiyas. There are differences of opinion regarding reasoning by analogy and its use in argumentation. That's not to be used as an excuse for oppression or like going into some country and being like, yeah, no, your soil's mine. Edward said so on chicken philosophy. No, that's not what I mean. I just mean when people are like marching and be like, this is our ancestors' land. Get the fuck out or we'll kill you. That's fucked up. Don't do that. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, indeed, what? There are differences of opinion regarding reasoning by analogy and its use in argumentation, or dalil, or as a source of fact. Indeed, from a certain point of view, thank you, Obi-Wan, it is intellectually justifiable, and in certain cases, using it seems preferable to rejecting it. I don't think that abstaining from something in a meditative, ascetic spirit necessarily is contingent upon whether it's intellectually justifiable. Like all the things that Buddha said that the monks shouldn't do. Doing them is intellectually justifiable. In Ajivika, that was the other group of ascetic monks wandering around the same woods at different times. Anyway, no, there were 62 different wandering tribes. Buddha was one of them, Mahavir was another. It's trippy stuff. It was quite a century. 6th century BC, Bihar. That was better than the 60s. As far as cults go. Indeed, from a certain... I wonder who their Manson was. I haven't heard. Indeed, from a certain point of view, it is intellectually... No, we read that already. Using it seems preferable to rejecting it, while in other cases the opposite is true. Whatever the case, chaos does not constitute a decisive argument in and of itself. The same is true for an account that comes from a single source. There is agreement that it should be accepted, even though it does not in itself confer certain knowledge, and it is one of the sources that help determine the legal prescriptions. The same should be true for chaos when it is so clear that no room can be left for doubt. Even though I am opposed to it for my own personal use, I do accept its use by others. That's called not being an asshole. See? Be like Ibn Arabi. Don't be an asshole. It's your little PSA for today. I do accept its use by others to make decisions on legal questions if their effort at interpretation has led to affirming its validity as a legal source. It matters little whether the individual is right or wrong in his effort of interpretation. The lawgiver has, in fact, validated the mujtahid's judgment, even if he is in error, and has rewarded him. But if, in his attempt to legalize chaos, he has not supported his opinion with any proof from the book, the Sunnah, Ijma, or all three at the same time, it is not licit for him to make a ruling based on chaos. All right. This has, so if a judge is looking at the laws, and none of the laws, cover what he's saying and say, well, this is like that, and therefore that. So slippery slope, you're fired, or whatever. That's doing chaos, right? Something like that. All right, don't look away from the book without sticking your finger on it, Edward. In issues regarding legal statutes, right, okay, it nevertheless does happen that an equitable man's thinking ability allows him to formulate a stronger proof through the use of clear analogy than through authentic information that happened to come from a single source. Such information, after all, is allowable only because of the good opinion we have of those who reported the information. Since the law forbids this, and all we can say is, quote, I think, end quote, or in my opinion it is true that, end quote. On the other hand, for us, clear chaos is associated with authentic speculative thought. We have recognized the validity of speculative thought, which we are legally ordered to practice in the divine words. Quote, did they not consider the kingdom of heaven and the earth? End quote. That was Quran 7:185. Quote, were they not thinking that their companion was not possessed by the jinn? End quote. Quran 7:184. There are a number of other similar passages in the Quran. Exclamation point! All right. I'm not following it enough to know why there would be an exclamation point there, but maybe you are. I think what we're listening to is some kind of Nepal thing. If so, it's the second to last song in the description below. This came out like last year, so a lot of the other stuff was from the 70s. Well, anyway, so is what it is. Were they not thinking? Yeah, no, we read that. The lawgiver thus recognizes the ability of speculative thought to establish the existence of God, that is, of the most fundamental of principles, and then to recognize the oneness in all the roles he plays as divinity. He prescribed that we know intellectually that there is no God but Allah. We then thought about what the status of this divinity should necessarily be, according to rational argument. Then, using the speculative thought we are prescribed to employ, we reflected on what might confirm the truthfulness of what the messenger brought from him, even though he was nothing more, quote, than a man like us, end quote. There's a bunch of times in the Quran where he describes himself that way. With our reasoning abilities, we reflected on his signs and on the proofs he manifested regarding the truthfulness of the messenger, and we established that it was true. These are fundamental principles. If a single one of them collapsed, the laws of the religion would be null and void. It is speculative thought that allows their firm establishment. Thus, divine law relies on it and asks the faithful to use it. Reasoning by analogy is a form of speculative thought. Do you believe that God would authorize its use in such issues and in such fundamental principles and forbid its use in practical matters, about which we find no mention in the Holy Book, in the Sunnah, or in Ijma? It is our firm opinion that it necessarily has a legal status of divine origin, and that when the other roads have been closed, there is no other way out than to return to this principle, that is, to speculative thought. By basing ourselves on the book and the Sunnah, we both established this and, after careful consideration, concluded that Qiyas is indeed in this procedure, and from the moment it is recognized as authoritative in the very principles of the region, one of the sources of proof where legal prescriptions are concerned. When it becomes a necessity, and when we find no decisive spiritual support, we thus seek to define the status of things that the law does not speak of, basing our thinking on the status of things about which it does speak, as soon as we can consider it to be logical that the lawgiver's intention is the same in the two cases, and allows them to be dealt with in the same fashion. Whoever declares blameworthy the individual who affirms the legitimacy of reasoning by analogy, or condemns the mujtahid who uses such reasoning regarding either the basis of laws or derived questions, is behaving improperly in regard to the lawgiver, since it was he who established its legitimacy. Thus, even though we object to the use of reasoning by analogy for our own personal use, we do maintain that its use is licit, because God has approved it for those whose efforts at interpretation lead to the need for its use. If he looks at it fairly, the individual who disagrees would refrain from discussing the issue, since the question is not really a matter for discussion. Quote, and God tells the truth and guides on the path. End quote. Quran 33:4. I mean, if what we're after, if we approach today's reading, like hoping to get something specific, then you won't. if you're hoping to get something useful, well, you won't. If you're hoping to get something that, from a certain point of view, kind of makes you go, huh, yeah, it is good. It's good to get that, huh. All right. The next section is the principles of legal prescriptions. In the present chapter, we shall outline that which pertains to the fundamental principles of legal prescriptions for experts, as we did for the practice of religious duties. It certainly would have been more logical for this chapter to precede the chapters dealing with ibadat, but such is not the way the task was given to us. The decision regarding the present arrangement was not a personal decision. If we were proceeding rationally, the place of this chapter in the hierarchy of wisdom would be quite different. It is like the verse that says, quote, perform prayers and the middle prayer attentively. Okay. And quote Quran 2:38. This verse is placed between the verses relating to repudiation of marriage and the verses dealing with testamentary measures which precede and follow, respectively. It may look as though the verse is not in the right place. It is, however, placed right where God destined it to be. I would normally cut to, what's his name, Gandalf, saying, a wizard arrives, when he means to. It is destined to be because he knows what is appropriate for all things. The wise man, or wizard, if you will, the wise man, al-Hakim, is the man who does as he is supposed to, when he is supposed to, in the way it is supposed to be done, even if ignorance keeps us from knowing why all this is fitting. Ignorance keeps me from knowing why all this is fitting. Well, it's a little bit elastic. It stretches and sort of a one-size-fits-all within reason. In the way it is supposed to be done, yes, it is God himself who imposed this arrangement of subjects upon my hand. This is why I have kept my opinions and my thoughts to myself. I think the music really helped, because reading Ibn Arabi, though it is always fun, since we knew it was going to be reading Ibn Arabi talking about Sharia. I don't know about you, but I was kind of like, all right. But this made it tolerable, and he's talking on a meta level about the law. I think a few things clicked. He's not saying anything about the law isn't good, which probably was a good idea for him to not say. You know what I mean? He's not going to criticize it as it is. But he's talking about approaches toward it. He's saying, even though personally, I don't reason by analogy. I've sworn that off. Refraining from a certain practice. If there's a question and there's a direct answer that directly answers it, that's the answer as far as he's concerned when it comes to legal things. But if there isn't, he refrains from going, well, it's kind of like that, and that says that, so therefore, he doesn't do that. But he knows that society needs to have the option to do that when it's called for. And so he's not against it for others. And that's interesting, regardless of what the law is, whether it's modern or ancient or Eastern or Western or Midwestern or Mid-Eastern, what do they call that? You know what I mean? All right, cool. The music's winding down, and this has been an interesting experiment. I hope you enjoyed listening to these songs with me, and they're all linked below if you want to check them out at some later date. And next up on Chicken Philosophies, Gwydion's turn to do the black books. So we'll be beginning the third quinary, the third row of the 15, cycle of 15 of the metaphorical 15. I think today's reading about analogies fits nicely into the theme of the metaphorical 15. You can check out the playlist, the metaphorical 15. I know that the song ends in about a minute or a minute and a half, so I'm just kind of waiting it out. Because, I don't know, why end the episode a minute before the song ends? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying. Did you have fun? Comment below. Like and subscribe. Check out the Pymander Aquarian playlist. See what all you're missing on all the other channels. That's got all the other channels, all the channels. You might note that there is, in fact, an I Ching Walker Part 10. It's 3 minutes long. So you can find it on the Pymander Aquarian playlist. Alright. Thank you to all the musicians who contributed to the enjoyment of today's episode. Blessings of fire and all the planets be with you all. Something like that, right? Is it? Yeah, that's nice. Got the sun in the center and everything, sort of. Yep. And the song is winding down. Should we do an end screen today? Yeah, we'll do an end screen, but I'll let Editor Edward pick. Alright. Until next time, everybody, take care of yourself. You're still here? It's over. Go home.